All right, so now the first thing that we're going to be working on is adding the visual indication where when the user hearts an item, it just shows the user that the product that they attempted to add to their wish list was added to their wish list. So we just want to add the visual indication where when a user clicks on the heart, it turns red. So in order to do that, we're going to be using input checkboxes where, a user can select multiple options at the same time. And so we can do that, or even unselect if they want to. So we can use input in order to achieve this. So here we're just going to add inside our wish list container where basically it holds the SVG. We're going to add an input element. And so we know that the type that we want to use is checkbox. If we wanted, one item to be selected at a time, then we would use radio. But because we want the user to be able to select multiple products into their wish list at the same time, we're using checkbox. Then we want all of these inputs to be associated with each other. So we're going to assign this input a name, and this will apply for all of the products here. They're all going to have the same name. So they're all going to be associated by this name. And we're just going to call it wish list input. So now they're all associated by this name called wish list input. And this is how we're able to select this particular input in CSS. So when we want to select this particular input, we can select it by its name. And the CSS properties that we're going to add, for example, the heart turning red, will be applied to all of these wish list inputs, even though their states are all going to be separate. Like if one item is selected, then none of the items are selected. Only that item that was selected will be true and others will be false, for example. So they will all be separate, yet associated by the same name, wish list input. And then, let's close this now and let's reload our page. And now you can see there are checkboxes here. And obviously we don't want this to be the visual indication where user can select and unselect, but we want it to be, in a nice, more modern UI way. So where the user basically clicks on the heart and it turns red. So hence why we're going to be using hidden. Now, the consequence of using hidden for input is it makes input unclickable. So though it is there, it's hidden where it's not clickable. It's not clickable at all. It's as if we put display none on this input. So we're not able to click on this. So a way to make it clickable is to turn the container to be instead of a div, it should be label. So label, which is associated with input, will be basically the element that makes input clickable. So it kind of acts like a placeholder for input, where if we click on label, then whatever attributes and properties that we had for input will be applied. So label is the clicker of input. So when you check and when you see, we can see that the cursor turns into a pointer. But if we put it back to div, you can see that the cursor is not a pointer. But when we put it back to label, you can see the cursor has now turned into a pointer. So just to show you that it makes label makes the input clickable. And we don't need to add an ID. We don't need to add for, because automatically, since input is inside this label, it makes this input associated with this label automatically. If label and input were not together, like for example, if this input was outside, like for example, somewhere over here where it's merely just a sibling, then we would have to assign input to an ID where it should be unique. As always, for all of this list, for all of the products, it would be unique. Like for example, wish list input ID 1, wish list input 2, wish list input 3, and then we would assign a for attribute to label, where basically we would add where the value of for should be the ID that we set for input. So, however, because we're making input inside label, the label is automatically associated with this input element, so we don't need to add any ID or for elements or for attributes here. So now we just need to work on changing the color to become red. So we're going to head over to CSS and we're going to scroll down to where we have selected our add to wish list element. So right here, we have set the add to wish list element, and basically we're going to select this so that we basically want to change the properties of the SVG. So right now it is black, the outline is black, or the stroke is black, and the fill is transparent, no color. Then we want to set both of them to red. So we're going to select this, we're just going to copy and paste this. And we want the SVG path to be red, 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 everywhere red. However, we only want it to when a user selects an input, when the input checked state is true, basically. So in order to do this, we need to select the input. We need to add the input in this selection here. So we know that add to wish list, inside add to wish list, input is a child of add to wish list. So we're just going to add a space and we're going to add the input. Then we want to specifically not all inputs that, for example, we're going to add inputs later on for add to cart. So we don't want all inputs to have a stroke in red color. We want only the inputs that are wish list inputs. So we're going to select the name. I'm just going to copy this, wish list input. So in order to add the attribute, we're going to add these square brackets. Then inside these square brackets, we can add the specific attribute that we wanted to add, which is the name attribute and the values, the specific value. So it selects only the wish list inputs, only the inputs that have the name wish list input. We need to fix this because SVG and path path is a child of SVG, but SVG is not a child of input. But as you can see here, input is a sibling of SVG. It is not inside. Inputs cannot have children. So it is just a sibling. So in order to specify that input is a sibling of SVG, we are going to add this wavy syntax here, which is called that tilde. So now you can see that everything is red because the selection has become true. However, we want this to be true. The colors should be red only when input state checked is true. So only when it is checked, basically. So I've added this pseudo class checked so that this applies only where it becomes red. It only applies when this input becomes red. When this input is checked. So as you can see, this was checked earlier, so hence why it's red. If we unselect it, it becomes the checked value, the checked attributes are removed, so it no longer has these properties. It goes to the default where it's black and transparent. If we select, it becomes red because input was checked. So that just makes it easy for us, and we don't need to use JavaScript add event listener. That would just make things a little more tedious. It would make code more verbose and unnecessary when we can just do this simple toggle with input checkbox.